carnivore diet would probably be good for me. It's just too boring for me.
And here we go.
A lot of people are very familiar with the problem of too low of iron, but what's often not on people's radar and gets dismissed, but is very dangerous and preventable and easy to screen for and diagnose and treat, is hemochromatosis, which can also be called iron overload. Some people have what's called non-hereditary hemochromatosis, usually from eating a lot of meat. So the people that I see who have non-hereditary hemochromatosis are often on the carnivore diet.
Right, I need to just stop that there because she's talking about primary hemochromatosis, which is the HFE gene mutation. And then she's talking actually about secondary hemochromatosis, which isn't from people eating lots of red meat. It's actually from chronic liver disease. You can get it from frequent blood transfusions. You can get it from anemia. And she's immediately kicked off with a ridiculous point. It's not to do with eating lots of red meat. The most common cause of secondary hemochromatosis is chronic liver disease.
Voila. Then occasionally I'll see people that are on the carnivore diet that have hereditary hemochromatosis. And those people really need to be watched very closely on the carnivore diet.
I'm just going to add that I have 15 years in working as a coach, of which 10 has been low carb, 7 as keto, and 6 as a carnivore coach. And I also have a decade of private blood testing. And I am yet to meet anybody that's had an iron overload problem.
They're eating a diet that's very high in absorbable iron. They're like, superpower is absorbing iron. And so not the best environmental situation for somebody with that genotype in many cases. The reason that these genes exist is because they protect you from dying of low iron. Children are often low in iron, which is due to them having a high calcium diet, due to them growing requires a lot of nutrients, including iron.
She talks about calcium being high in an infant's diet. Well, of course, for good reason. The way we've been living, the environment and our circumstances may have compromised milk to some degree, but inherently milk isn't flawed. It contains iron and calcium in the right ratios. Breast milk, like all mammals, is absolutely crucial for development. And so I don't know why she's even going into it. It's kind of a non-issue, in my opinion.
Iron is like this precious thing that we need. In many cases, it can be hard to get. You know, if you're in a famine, getting a cow would be like saving you basically to get all that iron and that protein. And so the body stores the iron largely in the liver for later when you're going through some type of a famine. So the reason that these genes exist and have been so successful is because they protect people from iron deficient anemia.
I just want to point out she's actually defeating her own argument because she's talking about epigenetics. She's talking about the scarcity of something means these genes have switched on. And of course, if there isn't a scarcity, then their gene expression can switch off. That's the whole point of epigenetics. If you say, well, the environment was such that this gene mutated, it is about environment, isn't it?
Obviously, iron is very, very important, which is why we've adapted in such a way that the body wants to make sure we have enough iron. Oxygen transport, immunological health and function, it's absolutely crucial. Brain health, everything.
Menstruation, childbearing, these are huge things that have historically killed a lot of women. They protect particularly women from dying of iron deficient anemia leading up to having children. And anything that can help you to have more children is going to be a successful gene. It doesn't matter if it ends up killing you, in your 40s or 50s rather than in your 80s or 90s, because you're probably not having kids anymore.
I would also point out, when you look at hemochromatosis and you're talking about the HFE gene, it's actually more commonly diagnosed in men. Although menstruation is obviously important with women, if this was all true, it would be happening in women more than men. So it doesn't sort of pass the common sense test, what she's saying so far.
You've got to pull the trigger on these things. It's not like you have a certain gene, this is your future, it's written in stone. You can reverse Alzheimer's when you catch it early enough, even later on in age. The body knows exactly what it's doing. It tightly regulates things very, very well. Heme iron, for example, is one of those things. But you have to pull the trigger on these genes, these weaknesses.
High iron, while it can affect children, and I've seen that, and it can affect women of childbearing years, it doesn't tend to be the big problem for them, just because women have menstruation and then they can become low in iron. And then men, while that's really important for men don't tend to have problems until they're older as well.
I need to just stop that because she then went against what she said earlier about women having periods and that's causing a problem of bringing children up. That's a problem. That's the reason for it. Now she's backtracking and saying it's not a problem. And I think this is why a lot of people ask me to have a look at this video, because there's no through line which is consistent.
Mothers who are anemic, low in iron during the first 30 weeks of their pregnancy, their children are at a higher risk for having a lower IQ for the rest of their life. The brain needs iron to make dopamine and for neuroplasticity and really for just the brain to develop. It's very important to have this iron. Now, too much iron in the brain can cause Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and bipolar and multiple different issues, but low iron.
Is there any literature that proves this causation of these things?
None at all.
And this is typical of what this lady is presenting, is this constant conflicting information.
Yeah, I think every sentence is how good iron is, but how bad iron is.
Yeah.
You can't say Alzheimer's, bipolar, such and such without proof or references. Definitely, I have not seen anything in the literature that proves those things.
No.
When you have a hemochromatosis gene, what happens is you make less hepcidin. And if you make less hepcidin, then you're going to absorb more iron. Like, that's basically the problem. That's the whole problem. But if you're in like a normal iron environment where you have, or even a high iron environment where you have, fortified foods with iron.
When you're a carnivore, there is something that isn't normal. It's different because of the way we're eating. So how do we get most of our iron? Was actually the recycling of red blood cells. So if you're looking at about 25 milligrams of iron a day, that's coming from aged red blood cells that are dying. And from food, we're getting between 1 to 2 milligrams. So 90% of our iron on a daily basis is coming from recycled red blood cells. We know from reticulocyte counts in the carnivore way of eating that red blood cells seem to be lasting longer. It's provable. It's not woo-woo. The recycling of heme is reduced by about a third. That's a huge amount of iron that's not being recycled. She's really going on about diet. 25 milligrams from your body and 2 milligrams from food. I tell you, this is a big deal. Our genes are looking at this and saying, right, okay, we've now got much healthier red blood cells. They are lasting longer. Therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to store some more iron for a rainy day. Once you've got that little bit of knowledge, and keep that knowledge in the back of your mind, everybody in the carnivore community, our red blood cells are kicking around for a bit longer. So our heme is staying, our hemoglobin is staying in the red blood cells. It's not being broken down and recycled.
I'm not recommending anybody be on any specific diet. I'm just recommending that everybody period needs to have the hemochromatosis genes tested for, because they need to know if they have those genes, and they need to have the labs like the iron panel and the ferritin and the CBC to know what they're.
About 15% of people will be missed on the hemochromatosis testing because the testing isn't that nuanced at the moment.
If they have high iron, then that's probably not a good time to go and get on a carnivore diet. Like, maybe try to get your iron levels in a better place. There are therapies you can do to get your iron lower, like blood removal, there's supplements, diet. But if you're on a carnivore diet, then it just sometimes becomes a harder situation to keep your iron in a normal level if you're somebody that just naturally absorbs a lot of iron.
So normative ranges for bloods are not optimal ranges. Most of the ranges are based on a population that eats 45 to 65% carbohydrates. It isn't about just looking at these numbers. It's about looking at these numbers and interpreting the numbers in the environment in which these numbers are produced. Ferritin, that is the storage form of iron, and that is normally a higher level than somebody eating 45 to 65% carbohydrates. And their other readings are often awful, and they're anemic. The only 3 people that have ever fainted with me taking blood, all were vegans.
Oh, no. Anyway.
Personally, as somebody who is a very autoimmune person, I understand the benefit of the carnivore diet, of getting, on a very low allergen diet. And I see the benefit. I've seen it be helpful in patients. Me personally, I've never been on the carnivore diet for a long period of time because to me, it's like too boring.
All righty then.
And I can find ways to be healthy as far as I'm concerned and feel good without it. But I still have.
Did you want to comment on the carnivore diet is too boring?
It's to me, I can't help it. It's almost like the Kendi berry filter is what I would call it. Should I adopt a proper human diet if, and blank, blank, blank. She said that she doesn't really conform with any real diet specifically. But what other animal in nature, if they could communicate in our language, would say the same thing? I don't think I should be eating what I'm designed to eat, anatomically, biologically, physiologically, because it's boring. Do you think cows think, "Oh, I'm a bit bored of the grass today. I think I might try some apples and some apricots." And it's just that's how I hear it. It's this nuance that she's failing to address. And when we step outside of this box, this species appropriate diet box, this is when we start to pull triggers on all of these genes and all of these problems and predisposed weaknesses as individuals. And that's the mistake. I'm bored. I deserve a treat. I deserve to poison myself today because I did so well at work this week. And so that's how I hear it. It just sounds absolutely crazy to me. But there you go.
Yeah, I can imagine watching a David Attenborough wildlife program and him saying, "And the lioness has brought a lovely antelope to the lion." He looks at it and he says, "Boring."
Yeah, where's
Not
my
eating
dessert?
that.
Chocolate fudge cake, please. Yeah.
I have to eat meat 3 times a day. Like I ate a huge amount of meat just because I am not a good absorber of nutrients. So, but I also struggle with low iron for multiple reasons. So carnivore diet would probably be good for me. It's just too boring for me.
Yeah.
The liver is another organ that is that Achilles heel for hemochromatosis. The reason for that is because the liver, it produces a lot of hepcidin. What hepcidin does is it will increase iron absorption or it decreases iron absorption. So what happens is whenever somebody...
Yeah, now that's quite vague because she said hepcidin reduces dietary iron absorption. But actually, what does it do? It decreases the activity of the iron transporter ferroportin. So it works on the thing that lets it work in the intestinal cells. That's what it does. Now, when you start to do that, you can then look at all the other bloods and see what's going on, because once you reduce the amount of transporters, you would see that the body will adapt. And that's what we see all the time, because there is such tight management of iron. It's such a crazy example, actually, because you just don't see it. We don't see it in the carnivore diet. I don't see it in bloods. All right. So I've had over 1,000 clients that have given me bloods, and I've yet to see this. This is all theoretical, and it's all based on people not eating carnivore. Surely the body knows better than some person that has decided that this is high or low. And again, we're a different cohort of people.
Somebody has a lot of iron, then they will deposit it largely in the liver or in the white blood cells, because they're trying to get the iron out of the blood, because iron, it can feed infections. Often the body will try to make more hepcidin, and then as you make more hepcidin, then it will get the iron out of the blood and it will put it into ferritin and largely like the liver or the white blood cells or even the GI lining. This is why a lot of people with hemochromatosis develop a lot of GI issues.
She's talking about the fact that ferritin is an acute phase reactant. That's a posh way of saying it locks in iron when there's an infection. And that's a really protective mechanism. So we have more ferritin when we have an infection. And some people will have an infection they don't even know about. The body is just dealing with it and the ferritin's high. So I've seen somebody with a very bad infection. The ferritin was 490. When the infection went, it was 92. Happy as Larry. Within 3 weeks, it went from that level. That was just normal function of the immune system. And she's gone into sort of the intestinal lining, a key role in ferritin, storage of iron in the mucus layer. When you get ferritin turnover happening, when you get the epithelial cells regenerating and flushing out, that's taking iron with it. So when you get these people saying the only way you can get rid of iron or regulate iron is by therapeutic phlebotomy, that's giving blood, or your menstruation, that isn't true. Your entire intestinal lining will recycle over 3 to 5 days. All right. The quicker the turnover, the less likely you are to get problems, actually. So that's why you don't get cancer in some of those regions. You're saying there that it's 10 days, aren't you, that the complete lining recycles? Is that what you're saying?
3 to 5. I tried to.
Yeah, 3 to 5. Right. Okay. So this turnover is absolutely not mentioned when you go onto carnivore, and I think you are a great example of this. Your intestinal lining becomes non-leaky. It improves. The cells are turning over and they're much more healthy. Well, every time that lining goes, it takes the mucus with it. And what's in that mucus? It's ferritin. Mucosal ferritin goes. Never mentioned. Now, if you have leaky gut, if you have problems with your gut, which is what she's alluding to there, that's the root cause. It's not the iron. It's the fact that your gut is not repairing properly.
Anecdotally, I know a lot of people don't like to hear that word, anecdotes, but in terms of the anecdotes, when people go on a carnivore diet, they can have hemochromatosis and all of their iron normalizes. The body regulates this very, very well indeed. So we've seen it time and time again. These people, it's almost like an anomaly. We don't clearly understand it. And we shouldn't really speak as if we do, because it is still a bit of a mystery as to why the body seems to correct in such a way. But obviously it does have to do with the fact that humans are designed to eat a certain way. And when you put them on that diet and lifestyle, things correct and fix and heal and everything is regulated. It must have something to do with fructose or non-heme, non-heme iron. It's very, very different from heme and the way the body functions when you're eating heme iron, and you can eat an abundance of it and the body deals with it very, very differently.
I don't ever like to see ferritin over 100. If somebody has a hemochromatosis gene, I don't ever like to see it over 75. Ideally, more like 50 to 75 range.
Where do these numbers come from? It's plucked out of the air.
Yeah.
What about in a carnivore, which is different to somebody that's eating 45 to 65% carbohydrates? What about someone that's getting plant sources of iron? Big difference.
Why don't you address your diet and lifestyle? The iron individually isn't the problem. You're homed in on one thing. I think you have thought too much about this, yet you've missed it. You've missed the point. It is kind of interesting, isn't it? That someone that seems to specialize in this one particular category is kind of blind to all of the nuance, which makes a lot of sense. That's really the most important part. Not everybody that has this same condition or even has pulled the trigger on their genetic condition is doing the same thing. We are so individual. It's unreal. Get the iron under control. It's like, no, get your life and diet under control.
Donating blood is one tool. Another tool that is really valuable is like diet. And if you want to stay on the carnivore diet, then you can add green tea or teas or coffee. Eat those whenever you're eating, because if you're eating something with iron, and you're drinking tea or green tea or coffee at the same time, then you're more likely you will not absorb as much iron. Okay. Avoiding like vitamin C or N-acetylcysteine supplements is a very helpful.
That does show that you don't really understand what's going on, because that's just mainstream advice. You need vitamin C to absorb iron. No, you need vitamin C to absorb non-heme iron.
And she's talking about teas. It's like, why? Go on, get into it. She never says it. All the oxalic acid. And that's why your doctor tells you not to drink tea with your iron supplement for that reason. So she's talking about have oxalate in your diet so that you can reduce iron and things like this. But hey, kidney stones are great and all that kind of stuff. It's just amazing, isn't it?
So a couple of my favorite ways are, I really like curcumin. So curcumin is an anti-inflammatory
Well, it isn't. My good friend Richard Smith's head would explode at this bit, because it isn't an antioxidant. It's a pro-oxidant. What happens is when you have that particular supplement, which is the active compound in turmeric, you elicit a response from the NRF2 pathway. Now, you're smiling because you've heard this a few times, I know, and Richard would not let me off if I didn't mention this, but when you elicit the reaction from the NRF2 pathway, what happens is your body's perceiving an oxidative stress, a problem from that compound. So it releases glutathione. Well, actually, it's a protein that goes to the center of the DNA and it makes a transcription. And anyway, the bottom line is what happens is it then produces enzymes that go out and they are antioxidants. It's got proteins going into the system. Now, when you look at glutathione, what happens is you get this huge rise. And then when it comes down, it doesn't go back to baseline. It goes down below.
I was going to say lead and cyanide would be just as good of a suggestion to express the same antioxidant pathway.